Good morning, folks. I'm Smokey the Bear, one of the co-founders of Berachain, and I'm going to talk to you guys about modular liquidity. First of all, how well can you guys hear me right now? It's like decent overall? Yeah? Okay, cool. The other thing is that I had to talk at Modular Day earlier today, so I decided to talk about modular liquidity because it felt like, a little bit of a, two birds, one stone kind of thing. So I guess we'll start by talking about what is modular liquidity. No one really knows. I'm not too sure myself, but it sounds like a good word and kind of gets the people going, so I think we'll lead from there. I think we'll break it down into a couple of concepts. First and foremost, what is modularity itself? It's a buzzword recently. It's price go up with Celestia. It's everything in between. But beyond that, it's also this idea of like flexibility or, drag and drop in a blockchain, this fluidity with your design and how you build a stack. It can be that in a very traditional sense of, hey, you've got your DA layer, your execution, your settlement, or it can be as simple as plug and playing a module within the Cosmos SDK, like we do. But beyond that, we actually think a lot about liquidity. Right, liquidity can be defined in so many different ways, but when we think about it, it's actually capital that's contributing to activity on a blockchain. In some ways, that can be part of a validator set, liquid staked, etc. In other ways, that can be capital that's actually living on the chain itself. It can take the form of ERC20 tokens, LPs, NFTs, ERC721s, 1155s, everything in between. But it's got to be doing stuff on the chain. So, we asked the biggest question of all, which is why the fuck is there a guy in a bear mask sitting over here or standing over here and talking to you about this? It's not an unreasonable one. And that's where we get to Berachain, because I'd be irresponsible if I wasn't here talking about liquidity and talking about Berachain in parallel. Berachain is a modular, EVM-compatible L1 built on top of the Cosmos SDK and powered by what we call proof of liquidity. Proof of liquidity is a civil resistance or consensus protocol that's meant to turn liquidity into a form of security without sacrificing it and use it to power applications that are building on top of the chain. In short, Berachain really helps to make liquidity flexible and fluid. So when we think about this, and we're at Liquidity Day, of course, it's how do you make liquidity do stuff? How do you actually get liquidity? We've seen a number of approaches recently, some more legal than others. But let's take the approach of, Blast and Manta. You've been able to get a whole bunch of relatively low risk, blue chip, opportunity cost reduced yield bearing assets in the form of, Lido ETH, Ondo USDC or USDY, etc., and use that to bootstrap a whole bunch of pre-launch TVL and a multisig. Cool. Works. Very effective. The next thing that you can do, and this is perhaps a little bit more about how we think about building an ecosystem, is this B2B2C approach of building a whole bunch of different nodes or applications that can actually fulfill what I think about as the next million or next billion users mean, right? I think we talk a lot about onboarding people into the space. I think one of the biggest issues that we face nowadays is that there isn't really that much in crypto that people want to use that they can uniquely access. And my thesis on the space, and I think our thesis as a team, is very much so on one hand, abstraction, and on the other hand, the development of highly composable, entirely novel applications built on chain is what will actually spur that next wave of adoption. So really, it's how do you get people to build good apps that can in turn bring new people into your network? And how do you arm those apps with as many resources as possible to do whatever they can for people? So the first thing is, and this is one of my favorite things, delegation, get other people to do it for you. You find your GMXs, your makers, your Aves, your Lidos, your Uniswaps, whatever it might be, that can actually uniquely enable applications on your chain. But a big question, one that we'll probably end up touching on later today, is how do you actually make people build uniquely on you? It is a wasteland out there. There are tons of forks everywhere you go. Very few chains have differentiated applications. How do you actually lock down those winners? Those groups that can actually become shelling points or vacuums for a new ecosystem in the way that GMX brought capital into Arbitrum, Friendtech brought capital into Base for a time, DFK brought capital into Harmony before it blew up, rest in peace, everything in between, right? And what causes one of them to actually build on your protocol? And this is how we enter proof of liquidity. It's meant, as I said, to make liquidity flexible and to work for the applications building on the chain. So, proof of liquidity, in essence, is realigning value flows across a network. The way this works is that the block rewards on Berachain do not actually stick alone with the validators as they do in traditional proof of stake chains. These block rewards actually go primarily to applications building on the network, whether that is a DEX, Perps Vault, and lending market that we start with, or over time, any given application building on the entire network. That means that users can maintain their behavior, applications can maintain their design, while getting the additional, utility, and in some cases, value of the governance token of Berachain, BGT. Now, one important thing to factor into this equation is that BGT, or the BERA governance token, it's kind of on the nose, is entirely illiquid and can only be obtained by doing the work or providing the value of adding liquidity to the ecosystem in a governance-approved manner. So this kind of funky diagram featuring a BERA basically, walks through the user flow and the incentive flow in the network. What's really, I think, important to zoom in here is the validator protocol interactions. What Berachain enables for the first time is for protocols to work directly with validators to bootstrap their own liquidity. So the way that works is that a protocol could basically partner with a validator, say, hey, I'm going to bribe you or give you an incentive with X amount of my tokens, X amount of my fees, X% of my emissions, whatever it might be for a given time frame. And in exchange, you're going to direct X% of the block rewards that you are winning as a validator towards my pool on the chain DEX, on my application itself, once approved by governance, everything in between. This actually means a couple things. On one hand, validators have unprecedented economic control or economic incentives across the entire ecosystem and can do more than they can in almost any other proof-of-stake chain, while still having opportunities for MEV, block reordering, everything in between. And protocols can actually work closely with these validators to give, users who are using them not just emissions in the form of their own tokens or their own fees, but that of effectively the, staking and eventually turning into gas token of a whole blockchain network. The way this works is that each validator on Berachain, there's about, 100 plus because they're, we're a Cosmos chain, tend to make consensus under the hood. Each validator has its own cutting board or pie chart. They're able to effectively say how they'd like to direct incentives across the ecosystem. So every time they win a block, 50% could go towards the DEX, 50% could go towards a lending market pool, or it could go all over the place. It's really up to each of them. And the weighted average of each of those validators' vote weights, which is determined by the amount of liquidity that users have effectively provided, and then staked BGT with them, is what determines emissions across the entire network. So, as we see it, Berachain drives value flow from the validators to the applications to the users, as opposed to the other way around as we see nowadays. So, basic, process here, user provides liquidity on the DEX, super simple, starts earning block rewards in the form of BGT and the trading fees on their LP. Then user delegates that BGT that they earned to one of their validators. That validator may be getting bribes from protocols or itself, and then they'll, continue funneling that towards the user, along with a portion of fees generated by the entire network. User's getting paid. User's pretty happy at the end of the day. It's getting block rewards, trading fees, protocol incentives, validator incentives. Good day. And the way that we think about this is how do we minimize friction for applications building on the network? As much as I love devs are lazy. I'm lazy. It's good. But with that, you don't want them to have to modify their fundamental code base, their design choices, all the hard work that they put in along the way in order to be retrofitted to your network. So as we see it, the whole idea of proof of liquidity is to allow any form of value to plug into POL such that, an application can be powered by a chain, whether it's a Uni v3 style LP, an NFT AMM, a marketplace, a social fly platform, anything in the middle. And, why is it modular? Because I talked about that word a little bit earlier. We actually see for the first time, I think, a highly differentiated and a highly decentralized flow of block rewards across the entire network. Liquidity is kind of like rivers, right? It goes to all these different pools, all these different applications, a number of which will inevitably end up integrating, involving each other, right? So the whole idea here is that the block rewards have more, I'd say, flexibility than we've seen in any other network to date. So, the whole idea of Berachain is the idea of having your stake and eating it too. You get your LP fees, you get your commissions from whatever protocol you might be using, and you get the unprecedented ability to actually take that governance token and use it to enhance your own emissions, use it to enhance your own liquidity profile, use it to enhance the pools that you're working with. So, hopefully game theoretically sound. And, when we think about liquidity as a whole and, where we end up at the end of the day, of course, at Liquidity Day, we have to remember it's mercenary, right? We've seen the fun times with Alameda in the past. We've probably, many of us in this room have probably, farmed the shit out of something, rotated, then headed over to the next chain. If you want to actually maintain, a liquidity profile, I think there's a couple things you have to do. One is that you have to have a massive total addressable market. So the way that we think about this is by being EVM on Cosmos, we're able to access the developer community, the liquidity profile, and I'd say the ease of use of the EVM side of things, while also having IBC enabled such that if someone wants to go swap into TIA, Dimension, say, whatever it might be under the hood, they're able to do so without leaving their, their chain on Berachain. And beyond that, you also have to build applications or encourage the building of applications that have highly differentiated use cases. And the way that we see ourselves as a chain is effectively ending up with a few different win conditions, and it could be one of the three or all of them and a combination of the above. So, one, novel applications being built on the chain, and POL effectively allowing them to reach escape velocity or effectively reduce their activation energy, so as many of these top-tier, highly capable devs can basically build and go 0 to 1 on Berachain. The second is by doing so, hopefully bringing some of the deepest pools of liquidity into the network, such that then you have these swap aggregators, your 1inches, your 0x's, everything in between actually routing order flow into the chain, increasing MEV opportunities and driving more fees to BGT stakers. And finally, as we think about the ecosystem over a long term, we think about the proliferation of BGT beyond Berachain itself. We've been super excited to see the first couple of rollups actually starting to build on Berachain, and actually having these groups, set up, incentive profiles where You could have BGT rewards in exchange for sequencer fees, trading fees on a network if it's an app chain, everything in between. So the sky really is the limit, and what enables us to do this is by maintaining, I'd say, that core exchange of value for liquidity. So that's what we're here to do. We've joked about for a long time that, there's this meme that Berachain fixes this. The goal really is Berachain's here to fix liquidity and do our best to make it modular too. Thanks so much, guys.